With the British Grand Prix being this weekend, I thought I'd take a look at the time the British Grand Prix almost moved from Silverstone to Donington Park.
This would have been for the 2010 race. The plans were first announced in July 2008 by then F1 commercial rights holder Bernie Ecclestone. The deal with Donington was for 10 years. At the time, Ecclestone said Silverstone would not be given the race if the Donington Park plans fell through. F1 previously raced at Donington Park in 1993, but that was as the European Grand Prix. The plan was for the removal of the Esses chicane and turning Starkey Straight into the new pit straight. There were also plans to extend the track through the building of a new 4-turn infield loop section, starting and rejoining where the final corner was on the original layout. The new section would have extended the track length to 4.738 kilometers or 2.944 miles. Due to lack of access to Donington Park, it was also planned for the circuit to only be accessed by public transportation. On acquiring the British Grand Prix rights, Donington Park CEO Simon Gillette said, quote, "We are naturally delighted and extremely proud to have acquired the rights to bring Formula One back to Donington Park from 2010. At the beginning of the year, we acquired the circuit and its substantial lands. We made clear our commitment towards realizing the full potential of the park by making the necessary investments in current and future events that will see Donington revitalized, ensuring its leading position as one of the most iconic racing circuits in the world. To that end, we have now entered a new and exciting chapter in the development of the park, and one that will bring significant investment and regional development while securing the future of one of the most important and significant sporting events in Britain." End quote. Simon Gillette also had this to say in regards to the development plans. Quote, "We close the circuit from October to March except for testing, and we're going to be doing the same thing this year. During that period, we're going to be doing all the works that need to be done to the track to bring us to FIA standards. We're building the pits and paddock on the infield next year, and there's no reason why race meetings can't happen at the same time. During the closed period, we will be doing the cutting of the asphalt for the pit lane and for the track extension." End quote. And also, quote, "We don't have to move the barriers back. We have adequate runoffs. What we will be looking at is FIA FOM runoffs where there's a mix of asphalt and gravel." End quote. However, Silverstone's managing director, Richard Phillips, had expressed concerns, saying, quote, "I have my concerns. I know what it takes to go through planning. It takes time. Maybe they'll get fast track, but good luck to them." End quote. In June 2009, Bernie Ecclestone revealed that due to financial issues with Donington Park, it was not likely that the track would host the 2010 British Grand Prix, and that it was likely that the British Grand Prix would return to Silverstone. Backtracking on his earlier comments that Silverstone would not get the race, Ecclestone said, quote, "There will be a British Grand Prix next year for sure, but it all depends on Donington getting their act together. If not, we'll be here at Silverstone again. Don't worry, we have got an agreement with Donington, and I hope that they can complete the agreement and do all the things that they are supposed to do. But if they can't, we will be back at Silverstone." End quote. Ecclestone's stance in returning to Silverstone was apparently due to changes with the British Racing Drivers Club, with Ecclestone saying, quote, "There has been a big change within the BRDC. They've got more commercial people involved, and these people are prepared to do all the things that we want, which was the reason we left in the first place." End quote. FIA President Max Mosley echoed the same thing in an interview with Mosley saying, quote, "I think the chance of there not being a British Grand Prix next year is very small. In my personal view, and it's not for me to decide, is that it's highly likely it will be at Silverstone." End quote. On the status of the 2010 British Grand Prix, 1996 F1 World Champion and British Racing Drivers Club President Damon Hill said, quote, "F1 can go anywhere in the world and get a huge amount of money. That's what Bernie's wrestling with. But it's not his job to give a discount job to the UK. There's a whole load of reasons why it should happen here, but ultimately, you are competing against countries which are able to inject public money into their infrastructure and into the contract of the Grand Prix. And that seems to be the stumbling block here. Eccleston can get a value globally that is far in excess of what he can get for the UK. We can respect that it's a difficult position for him to be in. He has to answer to his shareholders. There are options on the table. There are discussions taking place, and I'm hopeful something can be sorted out. End quote. Donington Park had until October 26th to prove it had the 135 million British pounds required to upgrade the track. That deadline passed, and Donington failed to prove they had the necessary capital. In November 2009, the company that owned Donington Park went into administration, but Eccleston gave the option of the F1 contract to the new owners of Donington Park. However, in December, Silverstone was granted a new F1 contract. That contract was for 17 years. With the new deal, Silverstone was able to redevelop the circuit. A new arena loop was developed between Abbey and Brooklands. This was done in time for the 2010 race. Additionally, the pit lane was to be redeveloped. It ultimately moved from between Woodcott and Copse to the other side of the circuit between Club and Abbey. This change was not done until 2011. The arena loop was initially done for MotoGP, but was approved by the FIA for use for Formula One. Silverstone managing director Richard Phillips said, quote, We've always had 5-year deals and never been able to get the investment we need to redevelop. But 17 years gives us the ability to invest and move forward. We've always had the belief the British Grand Prix was an important cornerstone of Formula One, but with Bernie, you're never quite sure. At the end of the day, though, you have to have a British Grand Prix, end quote. The initial contract for Silverstone was reported to have a 12 million British pound hosting fee that was supposed to increase 7% every year. The final contract was reported to cap that increase at only 5% every year. It also had a clause that could allow either party to terminate the agreement after 10 years. Eccleston commented on the deal saying, quote, This will ensure the British Grand Prix is included on the Formula One calendar for many years to come, which is something I've always wanted. The team at Silverstone already know how to organize a good event, and now everyone can look forward to next summer at Silverstone, end quote. Damon Hill said, It's not easy to enter into an agreement of this magnitude. It's a big commitment, but the BRDC felt we wanted this relationship to continue, and we were prepared to back the negotiating team with the level of risk satisfactory for the deal to go ahead, end quote. In 2017, it was revealed that the British Racing Drivers Club was considering activating the 10-year clause. Donington Park made clear that they had no plans to submit a bid for the British Grand Prix. The BRDC would ultimately activate this clause, but just prior to the 2019 Grand Prix, it was announced that a deal was reached to see F1 stay at Silverstone until 2024. Donington currently hosts racing throughout 7 months of the year, with most of those being British National Series events. The 2 world championships that the track hosts are the Superbike World Championship and the Sidecar World Championship. Donington is a really good track. It's enjoyable to drive. I do think that the track wouldn't be great for modern F1 cars, as I think there's very little opportunity to overtake, and the track design makes it hard to follow, which has been a big issue with recent F1. I've never seen any kind of racing at Donington, so this is just purely me looking at track design and understanding what modern F1 needs to make it entertaining, and Donington just doesn't have it. Even considering the changes they were planning to make, if anything, those changes make it worse as it removes a good passing opportunity into the final hairpin. I do think that Bernie Eccleston and F1 were using Donington Park as a bit of a bargaining chip to get Silverstone to do what they want. Either Silverstone agrees to their terms and they get what they want straight away, or they move the race to Donington Park and Silverstone says, hey, we need to get the race back here, and then they do what Eccleston and F1 want. The recent purchase of Donington Park and then its subsequent failure that quickly after does kind of remind me of Motorsport Games, how they've come big into the racing game industry bought up a bunch of licenses and everyone's super hyped for it, and then nobody bothered to look to see if they had the necessary capital to actually make those products that they promised. So it does seem, though, that Eccleston and F1 didn't do a good enough job at vetting Donington Park to see if they were in a position to have an actual legitimate opportunity to host an F1 race. But this also goes in line with F1 at the time, with USF1, where they failed to see if USF1 had the means to be a successful F1 team. And clearly they weren't, as USF1 never even built a car to race. I do think, though, that F1 needs to be a bit more flexible and add more variety to the schedule. I think it would be nice to have a change of pace, to get to see new or different tracks than the same ones that have been hosting races for decades. This isn't that I don't like Silverstone, but that racing at the same track is just kind of boring at times. Sure, you might get exciting races here and there, but I think what adds more value is the unknown, or just that variety, where it's not the same race every year. There are certain races that bring the same feel to them every year. F1 kind of reminds me of how NASCAR was with their schedule. They got locked into a long-term deal with tracks and TV that prevented them from making adjustments to the schedule. It just kept boring tracks in the schedule. F1 locks themselves into long-term contracts a lot, typically 10 years, and there isn't a whole lot of change in the tracks that get to host F1. Just look at Qatar. Qatar has a 10-year contract to host F1, and they don't even have a racetrack for it yet. One way to expand is to maintain the same number of races, but instead of adding multiple races in one country or region, rotate those races. The United States is a perfect example of this. Next year, they're going to have 3 races in the US, and instead could rotate those races, opening up 2 more slots for F1 to go to different countries. South Africa, as that has been a major push too. But also, Kyalami would also need to make changes to upgrade the track to an FIA Grade 1 license. But opening up these opportunities and making it clear that there are opportunities out there to host an F1 race would make tracks more willing to consider those investments, especially in countries that already host F1. And getting more Grade 1 tracks allows for better selection, which means a better product for F1. If F1 were to push for rotating races, then Singapore and Malaysia could swap years, as they're in this, not the same country, but in the same region. This opens up an opportunity to bring back a fan favorite track in Sepang. Now, whether or not Malaysia and Sepang would be interested in that is questionable, though, as Sepang has publicly stated that they've moved on from F1, so it's not always as simple as that. Obviously, current tracks wouldn't be interested in rotating races because that takes more profit away from the tracks and the promoters. But F1 is testing the limits of the teams with their schedule expansion, and rotating races seems like the only possible way to keep expanding, but keep the schedule under control. And also, the more you expand the schedule, the more teams have to spend on budget, and that's been a big issue too, is reeling in the budget of the F1 teams. So now, you've heard from me, and now I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on F1's plans to move the British Grand Prix from Silverstone to Donington Park? Do you think Donington Park could put on a good F1 race? Do you think F1 should look at putting more variety in the schedule and possibly rotating races? Let me know. What do you think down in the comments? Thanks for watching, and until next time, so long, everybody.